Today on FIT TV, I am honored to have current New York State Senator and candidate for the U.S. Congress from the 1st Congressional District of New York, Mr. Lee Zeldin. Welcome to FIT TV.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. This is going to be fun. You are a very busy man. You grew up in Suffolk County, graduated from William Floyd High School in Mastic Beach, earned a bachelor's degree from SUNY at Albany, and a law degree from Albany Law School at the young age of 23. You spent 4 years in active duty in the U.S. Army, including military intelligence officer, federal prosecutor, and military magistrate. In the summer of 2006, while assigned to the Army's elite 82nd Airborne Division, which I'm familiar with, Lee deployed to Iraq with an infantry battalion of fellow paratroopers in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And at the rally in Center Beach in Long Island recently, I went to that, and I heard Major Allen West, as a distinguished guest, say, Americans should vote more military veterans into Congress. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
This is an important time for people to be of your experience in the military. Tell me, what is your geographic boundaries in your territory, exactly?
Well, so the 1st Congressional District is 8 towns. It's most of Smithtown, a little bit of Islip around the Hauppauge area, and then everything east. So you have all of Brookhaven, North Fork, South Fork, and Shelter Island.
All the way out?
Big district, yeah, all the way out to the east end.
Let's see. What has Tim Bishop had plenty of time for and not accomplished?
That's it's a pretty long list. You know, I've gotten along okay with the congressman. I'm a state senator overlapping with part of his district, and our offices try to work together with regards to constituent issues, but we just disagree on the best path forward for this country. I believe that he could have done, and our Congress could have done a much better job with regards to growing our economy to help business owners create more good-paying private sector jobs. We can do a better job in Washington fighting for our veterans who have fought for us. Congress helped implement new educational standards called Common Core, which I believe in higher standards, but I don't think Common Core is the answer. The congressman was very active in implementing Obamacare, which has resulted in higher premiums and deductibles and lost doctors, canceled policies, longer wait times. I believe that we need to repeal and replace it. And finally, I would argue that, you know, the congressman and Washington could have done a much better job securing our borders and protecting our interests overseas. And we see it right now with what's going on in the Middle East and elsewhere. We need to have a stronger, more consistent foreign policy than what we have under this current administration. And for those who believe in the Obama-Pelosi agenda, they should vote for my opponent. But if you want a new direction, I'm asking for everyone's vote on November 4th.
And I'm sure that we're going to get that for you. I'm going to ask you a question about Long Island, if we can go back to that. I'd like to go back to some of those other things you just talked about militarily a little bit later on, but many Long Islanders are suffering through enormous real estate taxation issues and some of the highest power rates in the nation. If elected as our congressional representative, what changes can you make to help Long Islanders?
Well, these are really important issues. I've heard a lot about them, whether I was running for my seat in the New York State Senate or still today. During my first year in office up in Albany, I co-sponsored the nation's strongest property tax cap. With regards to energy costs, I was a key person involved in the effort to reduce what's called the 18A energy surcharge, which adds to energy costs for residences and businesses. I think in Washington there has been a lot of missed opportunities with regards to advancing our nation's energy policy, to reduce our reliance on foreign oil, to even reduce our reliance on oil altogether. As far as reducing our reliance on foreign oil, the congressman has consistently voted against the Keystone XL pipeline. It's something that I would have voted in favor of. It's something that I support. There are ways to fuel our vehicles now that don't even require oil. But we have to continue to pursue our own domestic resources, which we can do safely. With regards to real estate, for us, 65–70+% of our real estate taxes are school costs. So all the different mandates that come down from the state and federal government, whether it's through legislation or regulation. Obamacare is an example of a mandate. Common Core is an example of a mandate. Now, schools are given pennies on the dollar to implement Common Core. We passed a bill up in Albany, which I voted against, requiring that textbooks that referred to a sea in Asia would have to change the name of that sea to something that was more, because I guess the name of the sea was something that the Japanese supported, but the Koreans found politically incorrect.
Yeah.
So they passed legislation that every textbook in the state that refers to this sea, you have to change. So school districts have to go out and buy new textbooks. It wasn't a law to white out the name and put a new one in. You have to go out and buy new textbooks. So I think you have politicians get elected to all levels of government who they don't really assess the unintended consequences of bad policy, and as a result, it's individual taxpayers and families start feeling the brunt of it. And I think many of our neighbors, our family, have hit their breaking point and they've left Long Island. They moved down south.
That was my next question. That it seems to be there's so many Long Islanders can't afford to live here, and that grandparents are losing their children who are now able to buy a home, not able to afford to stay here. So the grandparents are not able to stay in touch with their own grandkids, or their own kids for that matter.
Yeah.
And that's part of the...
And children are losing their grandparents, because I can speak from my own personal experience. Just about my entire mother's side of the family moved down to Florida. Some of them are in South Carolina. But my grandparents, while they were alive, they lived out their golden years down in Florida. My mother's down there.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. People from other parts of the state and country look at what we are making with the average income on Long Island, and they think that we're all rich.
Right.
But they don't assess the cost of living and the fact that that money doesn't go as far on Long Island as it may elsewhere.
You know, everywhere we go, the mandates are a big issue and the taxation issue. I would imagine that if the taxation issue is often the same, equal to, or sometimes even higher than your mortgage payment, and the mandates keep that number up high.
That's right. I personally believe that if something is worthy enough to mandate, then you should pay for it. And there are mandates that come down that are funded, and there are others that are unfunded. Some bright idea that some politician has to create a mandate on school districts, yet they want to tell school districts, it's your problem. It's my idea. I'm going to force you to do this, but you're going to have to figure out how to pay for it. I live in the William Floyd School District. And they spend 7 figures a year on a federal mandate called the McKinney-Vento Act. Well intended, that if you go homeless from your home school district, so you pop up with foster care relatives 30 miles, 40 miles away, the William Floyd School District is responsible for picking up that person every morning, that student, dropping them off at the end of the day. It's a 7-figure hit.
Yeah.
Well intended. You don't want to disrupt the education of this child who's going through some rough times. But to have no limit.
Isn't that voted on?
It was passed by Congress.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit about your military situation in the war. Now, maybe more than ever, your experience as an intelligence officer during the Iraq War could be a tremendous help to Americans coping with the threat of terrorism. Some Americans are not comfortable dealing with terrorism or understanding that evil exists. How would you inform the uninformed voter about these concerns? Because in my opinion, from what I've seen, all the people I've talked to, there's an uninformed aspect to every voter. They don't really understand this, and especially when it comes to war and terror and how to handle it. Certainly the left has gone away from that.
Yeah, that's true. Well, as a military intelligence officer, I had a top secret clearance, and you realize the value of intelligence, and there's many different ways to collect it. Sometimes it's through direct contact with individuals. Sometimes it's with signals that you might pick up, or with drones in the sky. So there's many different ways to acquire intelligence. And for us, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that some of our enemies abroad who are causing us serious threats, potential threats at home, and some very real threats ongoing with, we're literally seeing Americans and British journalists being executed by ISIS. The President's strategy is relying on Iraqi army and law enforcement who don't even show up to work. For a peaceful day, to show up at a precinct that's a quarter mile from their house, they're not even showing up. So as a strategy, to rely on those individuals to destroy ISIS, is unrealistic. And I think there needs to be a lot more consistency in the message. You know, the president, in his speech announcing his strategy, says that this is going to be different from past wars in Iraq and Afghanistan because there won't be any troops on the ground. And in the same speech, he announces that he's sending 495 additional troops to Iraq.
Yeah, why does he have to say that at all? I mean, I'm just confused as to why they started out that way.
It's a contradiction. He just contradicted himself.
Yeah.
I mean, are there troops on the ground or not? And who are you sending? What are their skill sets? Who is in charge of them? These are important questions. The key turning point in the war in Iraq was when General David Petraeus was put in charge of the surge and was given the flexibility and the resources to implement his vision. And that was a key turning point. I think the most important turning point in the war in Iraq was that surge in the winter of 2006 and 2007. For us at home, we don't want to see any of our men and women in harm's way. We have been stretched thin. We have military families who have gone through 6, 7, 10 different deployments. And we've seen the serious loss of life and limb. Sometimes we're not necessarily looking for a conflict, but a conflict finds us. And if we don't take it seriously, even though it's not ideal, and we'd rather not have that conflict upon us, we have to deal with it head on, or sometimes these problems become worse.
Yeah. How do we now go to those thought processes about the president and how he stood, and now suddenly he's giving new information? I don't know if you saw today the UN speech, but he had it seemed like he was going to reverse it, but he's still not putting those troops, boots on the ground, as they say. But we need to worry about our borders too. And how do we go about doing that? Because there seems to be a lot of stopping about that. We can't seem to accomplish that either.
We have vulnerabilities with our entry process. Our borders, whether it's the southern border, the border with Canada, we have Europeans who are enlisting with ISIS, who there are some expedited ways for them to come to the United States as European citizens. We need to do a better job securing our borders. Congress is completely dysfunctional. They should have done something. And the fact that Republicans and Democrats won't even talk to each other to work out a compromise really just shows how much our country's heading in the wrong direction. Back in July, the president put forth his strategy for the southern border. Senate Democrats put forth their plan. House Republicans put forth their plan. And they didn't spend any time after that talking to each other. They're not trying to find common ground. Everything's an election issue. Their priorities are to get reelected. So the political posturing and the sound bites, partisan rhetoric, it's unfortunate that they aren't solving our problems.
I was going to ask that question but later, but this is a good time to ask it. It seems like the political polarity is the worst I've ever seen. I followed politics for many years, and I still can't figure out why we're pulling to either left and right, pulling so far apart that there's no longer an ability to converse effectively. We can't get anything accomplished. This is obvious, right? Well,
I would say this. I mean, we have had Republican presidents and Democratic presidents who have had Congresses run by the opposite party, and they try to work together to try to find common ground. Victories when President Clinton was working with Newt Gingrich on welfare reform. Ronald Reagan working with Tip O'Neill.
That's right. Yeah.
But right now, this president, his only version of compromise is to get it 100% of his way all the time. There are over 300 bills, almost 400 bills, sitting on Harry Reid's desk that he won't even bring to the floor for a vote. And there are Republicans in Congress who believe that their only version of compromise that's acceptable to them is to get it 100% of their way all the time. So you have Republicans blaming Democrats and Democrats blaming Republicans. Quite frankly, we should be blaming both of the parties. They need to get their act together.
The Senate has blocked a lot of our efforts, from what I've heard. The conservative side of the equation has put in bills, and the Senate keeps blocking it. But why is the president going to executive order? What do you think is his rationale for doing that? Is he keeps saying that there's nothing gets accomplished as if both the Congress and the Senate are at fault?
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely overstepping his bounds, what his powers are under the Constitution. It's amazing as you watch some of the executive orders, the dozens of executive orders with regards to Obamacare. In the House, they will pass that reform. And then Harry Reid says, that bill is dead on arrival. There won't even be a vote. There'll be no debate, no discussion. And then the president enacts that change through executive order because it's his signature law. If anyone's going to change it, it's going to be him. Well, that law was passed through an act of Congress. And Congress wants to be involved in amending it to improve it. And the fact that that you're not seeing any of these proposals go anywhere is a real shame. The president is overstepping his boundary through executive order, and he really needs to try to work with Congress. It doesn't mean that he's going to get it his way all the time. He won't. But that's okay. You're elected President of the United States, but there's also 535 members of Congress who are duly elected around this country as well. Everyone deserves a voice. The entire government is not, you can't just all be consolidated under one particular person.
Yeah. It seems like it's very hard for everybody to gather also by looking at the news all the time whether there's going to be any change. It doesn't, it looks like this dysthymy is so thick and so big that we just can't get past our own position on the party. It's like party lockout.
Well, we've had one federal budget since 2007. You and I, our families, small businesses in our communities, local governments are all responsible not only for passing budgets, but for those budgets to be balanced. The federal government doesn't even pass budgets. It passed one since 2007. They certainly aren't trying to balance it. For whatever reason, they just play by their own set of rules. They kick the can down the road on some really tough decisions because they don't want to lose votes. You could blame both parties for that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think in the general that some of the, I hate to say this, but some of the political people viewing politicians think that your approval is, not your approval, but the politicians' approval is at an all-time low. We seem not to be able to think favorably about politicians, and here you are getting into this arena. What can we do about that?
Well, you have many people who, when they're running for office, they come to the voters and they say, if you elect me, this is what I'm going to do. And then they do none of it. And they come back 2 years later asking for everyone's vote again. And they're sharing the best excuse that they can possibly come up with as to why they got nothing done. When I was elected in 2010, I knocked on 12,000 doors. I said, if you elect me, I'll fight as hard as I can to repeal the MTA payroll tax, to eliminate the saltwater fishing license fee, to fight for our veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. And then during my first term, I obsessed over delivering over those promises. We repealed the MTA payroll tax for 80% of employers. We eliminated the saltwater fishing license fee. We created the PFC Joseph Dwyer program for vets with post-traumatic stress disorder. And there were other issues as well. So when I ran in 2012 for re-election, our banner was promises made, promises kept. I think one of the reasons why there's so much apathy and why approval is so low with politicians is because they do not deliver on their commitments. They don't keep their commitments. And it turns a lot of people off.
Sure, yeah. Let's talk about Common Core, which you touched on a little bit before. It seems to be a big issue today with teachers, and many teachers are against it as well. It's not like the carte blanche, like everybody's just going to do this. The teachers are against it and they are opposing it. What's your opinion about Common Core?
Well, as I said earlier, I believe in higher standards and challenging our students, but Common Core isn't the answer. We have standards created by the national, federal level, and then you have tests created by the states and curriculum set by the school districts, and nobody's talking to each other. The implementation has been horrendous. And you have a program that wouldn't get implemented on its own merit. The only way that you were able to get cash-strapped states to sign on to Common Core was to dangle carrots by dangling money in front of them. They needed the money, so states were signing on to Common Core standards before there were even Common Core standards. A lot of the material isn't age appropriate. You could go online right now to the New York State website.
Looked at some of it, yeah.
You go to the New York State website and look at the English language art domain for 6-year-olds. And we're teaching our 6-year-olds, first graders, about ancient world Mesopotamia, or the strategic advantage of the Tigris and Euphrates River with regards to the development of the city of Babylon.
Well, there's a lot of history, you know.
You know, good lessons. But for first graders, for 6-year-olds, yeah, we could have done, there are much better ways to raise standards for our kids.
Let's go back to it. You've answered so many of my questions, I'm struggling to find a new one for you, but you're doing a great job, of course. Let's talk about the immigration issue. The border we talked about, but what about our immigration policy?
Well, I think that it's very important that we secure our borders if we want to bring any of our challenges related to illegal immigration under control. I support legal immigration. We're a nation of immigrants. We all have the immigrant story. Our families coming here to pursue the American dream. Hope, opportunity, education, a better way of life for our families. There needs to be a process that is respected. Every nation's backbone is its rule of law. We have on the North Fork of this district, we have individuals, immigrants coming here, seasonal employees. They want to come, pay taxes, and go back home. On the South Fork with the hospitality industry, same thing. Employers who are harmed because the federal government and bureaucratic red tape, they're not granting visas on time to get their good workers to come here. We have individuals we're educating, PhD students, and employers who want to hire them, but are unable to stay. Yeah, through our legal immigration process, we can certainly encourage more to come to our country. But what about the compassion for those individuals who aren't here, who want to be here? And the only reason why they're not here is because they respect our laws. What about compassion towards them?
You know, some of the people have talked about some of the diseases that are recently coming across the border. The possibility exists that some of the immigrants have come across, the illegal immigrants have maybe spread those diseases, so now it's a health concern. I think we went a little bit beyond our means to allow that many people come across the border. I think we should have been a lot more protective earlier on. We got about a minute left? Okay. Any following statement you'd like to make in this last minute?
Well, for everyone who's listening, who want to get involved with changing Washington, there is no way that we can change Washington if we don't change the people we send there to represent us. The congressman has been there for 12 years. 12 years is enough. And if you keep re-electing the same congressman over and over and over again, you can't ever expect anything to change. The election's November 4th. We need everyone's support for everyone who lives in the 1st Congressional District. They could go to our website at zeldinforcongress.com. We're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. You can sign up for email updates. We have campaign headquarters. So we encourage everyone to get involved, help us change Washington by winning this race on November 4th.
Thank you, Lee Zeldin. That's www.zeldinforcongress.com. All right? Okay, thank you. Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture, and hopefully we'll allow ourselves with this information to go forward and vote for our next congressional victor, Lee Zeldin. Thank you.